Good afternoon. This is the Thursday, August 16, 2018 meeting of the Athens City Planning Commission. 2 members are absent. However, a quorum has been established. There is no one in our live audience to administer an oath to. Disposition of minutes. Are there any observations, comments for change or alterations?
No.
Make the motion.
Yeah, I will make the motion too.
No, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's 3 in favor and 2 absentees. Moving on to cases, case number 17-13, Menards renewal of application. Mr. Logue sitting in for Mr. Suroy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. As you stated, Commissioner, this is case number 1713, which is the Menards application, which was a Title 41 site plan review that was reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission as of June of 2017. The applicants are asking to renew their Title 41 site plan review, basically an extension of it. As many people have noted, they have not begun construction yet. And Mr. Sorois has been in communication with Tom O'Neill from Menards regarding this and advised them that if they were intending to do their project in Athens, that they needed to renew all of their permits. Menards has done so. They've submitted new permits to the city, and as part of that, they're asking for a renewal or a reapproval of their Title 41 application. As part of that, Mr. Sorois provided a letter to the Planning Commission dated August 10th, 2018, and he did ask me if he asked me to read that for the record. And this letter is dated August 10, 2018 to City of Athens Planning Commission from Richard Sorois, Director of Code Enforcement and Community Development. And this is regarding the renewal of zoning permit ZN 17-000010 issued on June 12, 2017, and Title 41 permit TA 41117-000001 issued on June 8, 2017. In accordance with Athens City Code, Section 23.03.22, construction period, which states, A, construction of a new building, repair, or alteration to an existing building shall commence within a year period from the date of issuance of the zoning permit, and 23.03.22B, construction of a new building, repair, alteration, or addition to an existing building shall be completed within a 2-year period from the date of issuance of the zoning permit, after which a new permit must be obtained. Menards of 5101 Menard Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, has requested approval for the renewal of permits associated with the construction of a Menards store on parcels E040280100801 and E040280100801, now owned by Menards and with the address of 2009 and 2011 East State Street. The Office of Code Enforcement has received a signed application for commercial project and application for Title 41 request for renewal from Mr. Thomas O'Neill, representative for Menards. Noted that no changes have been submitted and that the previously submitted plans and Title 41 requirements are in standing. It was noted that in an email dated August 8, 2018 from Mr. O'Neill, he stated that, quote, he wanted to explain that Menards had a handful of other store sites in Ohio that were purchased a year or more prior to our Athens acquisitions, and those stores are the stores under construction in 2018 for opening in 2019, end quote. He further states, quote, the Athens store is currently slated for construction next year with a spring 2020 opening, end quote. Respectfully submitted, Richard Sorois, Director of Code Enforcement, City of Athens.
Thank you, Mr. Logue.
Thank you.
Are there any comments?
I would like to comment on this. I'd like to give a lot of credit to Director Sorois and the Code Enforcement Office for being proactive in reaching out to Menards. There had been a lot of inquiries to the mayor's office about what is going on with Menards. Are they coming or not? And again, I think it deems being on record that the Code Enforcement Office was very proactive, not just with this business, but with others, where construction may not have occurred within the year as code reads, with beginning development, and as well, because there was even I was wondering when construction may start. So to hear that from Mr. O'Neill at Menards that will be taking place because of other stores that are in the queue. As I understand it, 10 to 12 Menards being built annually. I can only imagine that they would have a backlog in their queue, but to know that we're looking at 19 with a 2020 opening date, that it's good for the public to know that, because like I said, there have been a number of people inquiring as to what's going on. So,
anyone else?
This is also good news for the Far East End utilities. For the city, just my background in my previous position, we worked when we did the previous Title 41 review for Menards to come up with a mechanism where we could take a long overdue lift station offline and not have to have it anymore based on the construction of Menards, and we had put that on hold because of the delay in the construction, but to know that they're moving forward, this will be helpful for our public utilities. And learning of such in the midst of the East State Street construction project, that contractor has an alternate bid to do some of the work associated with that improvement, and now we can go ahead and keep that contract open even if we finish everything else for them to proceed, and it should line up okay. So that's good news.
Ms. Bain, anything? Okay. I'll go ahead and make a motion then to accept the extension.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That would be 4 in favor and 1 absentee. Thank you again, Mr. Logue. Appreciate it. And yes, thank you to Mr. Suroy for being on top of everything there. Communications. There is nothing at this time. Report from the city planner, Mr. Logue.
Just a few things this afternoon, all related to the city's comprehensive plan update. The first item is that everybody should be aware that we do have a series of online surveys available right now. There was a mass email that was sent out to about 250 email addresses of people that have asked for information and updates on our comprehensive plan that was sent out yesterday morning. All of those links to those online surveys will be available on the city's website by the end of day today. Somebody who's interested can just get on the city's website, ci.athens.oh.us, and search for comprehensive plan, and the surveys will be on the front page of the comprehensive plan section. Additionally, just so everybody's kind of aware of where we're moving with the comprehensive plan, we will be, as we transition from summer into early fall, we will start working on corridors of the city, looking at all of our commercial corridors. So that includes Stimson Avenue, Richland Avenue, Union Street, Columbus Road, East State Street, and the Uptown area. My intern Richard and I, we are going to start doing just some background analysis over the next few weeks, kind of just walking these, identifying issues, taking photographs, and looking at kind of the lay of the land as it stands. And then as we probably move into late August, we'll start convening a meeting or two for each corridor. Also, as we move into the fall and the new semester begins, we are going to work closely with interns as well as some Ohio University students to do student outreach. I have a goal of essentially doing a neighborhood level meeting with off-campus, in an off-campus neighborhood, to better understand the issues of our off-campus residents, but also understand from students' point of view, their perception of Athens, their perception of the town, what they tell people who aren't from Athens or have never been to Athens about their experience in Athens, and how they view the city, to better understand some of that. And we will also be piloting some temporary traffic calming solutions at a few different areas of the city to see how they work out, and having conversations with residents about strategies to slow traffic, to make the neighborhoods more walkable and bike friendly, and to address concerns about speeding traffic through neighborhoods. All of that will be starting, the corridor plans will be starting very soon. Those surveys are available now. We will keep those surveys up until the first week in October, which is actually 8 weeks, and there's 8 surveys, and each survey should take less than 10 minutes to complete. And so if you do 1 survey per week, we'll all have great information for the comprehensive plan. That is all I have this afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you, Arnie.
Any questions?
Paul,
Yes.
I have a question. First of all, I'm looking forward to seeing traffic calming on Columbia. Wow. Anyway, I traffic calm. I stand out in the street and do this to them every so often, the drivers that are driving 35 or 40 miles an hour down the hill. But I wanted to know, I was looking at, as I walked up the stairs, this Goodwill picture, and I wondered if we solved the problem of the old 2011 amendment to watershed or land development ordinance that caused us to have this structure built back. I mean, we talked about going through that and making that change to the code. It was, am I the only one that remembers that? No?
You're referring to having parking moved to the
back.
back.
Yeah, and then the drainage was a serious issue. I mean, I think it was something they did in 2011, and every time it's been tried, it ended up making a less than desirable project.
You'll have to refresh my memory, but
I can't remember it either.
just to make sure you're with that project specifically, your question is about the setback being so far into the rear,
Yeah, and
as
also,
opposed to it being up to the road.
yeah, and there was a problem
Yeah.
with drainage.
Yes.
That was the problem that occasioned the design and everything else.
And there was also, I believe, a portion, the front portion of that parcel is in the floodplain, but the rear was not. And so there was issues with the amount of fill they had to bring in and things like that if they moved it to the back.
Yeah. But it was, I thought that there were, maybe Paula was more conversant with it than I was, but I remember thinking, we should fix that. Because it creates, I mean, the parking behind is newer. It certainly is something that we could do, but the drainage was the problem. I'm all for drainage, God knows, in my neighborhood.
Of course, right.
You know, so there was some, what was it?
I don't recall the section of the land development code as to whether it was
Well, maybe it isn't,
addressed
maybe
or
it's
not.
somewhere else.
Right. And we have not resolved anything with setback requirements in B3 zones and
No, it yeah.
other zones like that. And I know we've had some conversations with that. The chairman and I mentioned it once or twice about looking at some of our corridors and whether we have the right zoning, whether the zoning should be B3 everywhere, or should it be more tailored to the corridor and to the patterns of the corridor to get a different design standard than what we typically get, which is parking and then building.
Name names, I'll say Debbie Phillips, I think, is the one who sponsored the ordinance, and I must have been asleep at the switch because I didn't realize the implication. It was for drainage.
Well, that would have been 2008 or earlier. She was sworn in.
I have the wrong date.
She was sworn in 2008 for state representative.
Okay,
the
then,
floodplain?
no, not
Changes?
floodplain, no. Nope. I'll try and find out what it is. Maybe I'll call Paula.
Mike?
We have to do, I mean, I thought we had to do something about it because so much land, I mean, it was just not a good use of the property. I remember almost everyone said that at that time.
Specific to that real estate?
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I do not recall those particulars.
That's okay. Maybe I don't either.
Yeah. I probably would not have been in the loop if we're talking 2008 or 9. That may have been an issue that.
Well, I obviously wasn't either.
Yeah.
So you're not talking about compensatory fill,
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah, I think
You
so.
are.
Yeah.
So the floodplain regulations were updated in early 2009, if I'm not mistaken, and that was one of the last things that Debbie Phillips worked on while she was on council.
It sounded good with floodplain and everything else, but it had
Right.
on these little lots, it had a very negative impact.
Yeah, and those compensatory fill requirements, although they're in our code, I don't know that they are necessarily an effective means of addressing flood development issues, and I think we've kind of moved beyond that with some of our short-term issues, especially with stormwater prevention, that may better serve our development standards than having the compensatory storage, because it does kind of complicate development sites.
Yeah.
And
Small ones especially.
Small and big ones for that matter. The Menards is actually a really good one where we had negative impacts, development impacts that we required them to do, which from their perspective had cost, which is their perspective.
Well,
but also they were going to have to clear cut some real estate that otherwise would have remained as forested land.
In the floodway?
In the floodway, and to create basically dry ponds for compensatory storage for a flood that we might get every 50 years or so.
I think this is a good conversation. This is, a conversation, ironically, that the Service Safety Director and I just had, yesterday, and kind of thinking this through. What are some of the challenges that a developer may be facing, and what conflicts are there within code between different entities or sections of code, when it comes to development and whatnot. So I think it's time to look at that particular piece of legislation. As I understand it, there have been a number of variances that have come forward and granted based upon compensatory fill, and I think that's part of the metric that we look at. But anyway, I think that it's something we certainly need to look at.
Well, I know that, I'm clearly out of the loop with respect to floodplain, because I look at the river. I was driving along 682, and the river channel is about a third of what it was, and all that fill that came from Mother Nature is there. And I don't know how we can even use some of those Corps of Engineer numbers, because, well, maybe it'll all wash up. I don't know.
Yeah.
You have to have a lot of faith in engineers.
If I may, on this particular piece of legislation, because yes, the mayor and I were discussing this yesterday. The situation at Menards, given that we're talking about it today, it's timely. There was the legislation you're referring to requires compensatory fill in the 20 and 50-year floodplain. So it's an above and beyond standard on our on the minimum floodplain regulations that we have to have. In order to do that at the Menards site, the design plans called for removal of dozens or hundreds of more mature trees that then we subsequently, because of other aspects of our code, require them to plant back. So it's relatively illogical, as far as I'm concerned, that we have these conflicting aspects of our code that really it would be better to leave the mature trees from a stormwater both pollution prevention perspective and quantity. But our code didn't allow for that. So I do think it's high time we look at that. Two things that have passed since we made the modifications to the floodplain regulations were, number one, Title 5.07, which is all of our stormwater quality regulations. That was a prerequisite to our becoming named an MS4 community, which is having our stormwater permitted for quality. And there's a lot of best management practices included in that code that says that really help with flooding as well. The other thing that has passed is the lot coverage requirements, which and limitations. And I think that lot coverage limitation also helps mitigate flooding. So to also have the compensatory storage with the 20 and 50 year floodplains as part of our code, I think it's time we relook that, especially if it creates problems. You know, one of the justifications for keeping that provision in our code was that it would lower everyone's flood insurance. I don't know that has borne out.
The flood insurance game is a lot different today than it was in 2008 as far as the requirements for it and the federal payouts and increased premiums. That's across the board.
And we could have a long discussion about how much landowners in Athens are subsidizing the construction of mansions on the coast of Florida.
Or
wherever along the coast with our flood insurance premiums. And so I don't know that, but you know, that's a discussion for another day. But I do think it's time that we look at this legislation and make some common sense changes, and that's something that I, in my service safety director role, will work with the staff here in the city and bring something forward to either this body or council moving forward.
But do we have enough? I mean, is it timely? I mean, can we get it done? With all the other stuff that has to be done, do we need a consultant? Another perspective?
I don't think it's that. I mean,
if we're talking about the compensatory storage requirements specifically.
Well, not only that or anything else.
That section, I mean, it would be valuable, or I would say it'd be warranted for us to check in with ODNR's water office and say we're considering repealing a section of our, or we're looking at modifying a section of our flood damage prevention chapter. If we take this out, are we still compliant with the National Flood Insurance Program? I believe we would be, because these are additional standards that the city mandated above and beyond the minimums of the NFIP. And so, but I think it definitely warrants double checking that. And we can go from there.
And you know,
if there's interest.
It might be that we make the modifications in conjunction with some language on conservation design in other parts of the code. That's something we've talked about wanting to do, and Paul and I have said, you know, there's some really great models out there where our
for new construction,
as particularly subdivisions, because you know, I think subdivisions right now are you know, we're working off of a good language from the 80s, but you know, there are some barriers to conservation design in our current subdivision regulations, and so maybe the two things could go forward at the same time,
but we wouldn't apply them in the 3-mile limit, would we? That would be.
No, I don't think so.
I can't see that. All right, so I'd like to backtrack a little bit and ask one more question then. When you look at the Menards site, you see those trees are often they're all the trees that are going to be cut that are mature are close to the river, right? Correct?
Mm-hmm.
There are none across the street, are there?
Across the river, you mean?
No, across the street, because there was. It's a long story, but I just wondered where the trees were, because I think there's so much misunderstanding, and people, when they can't think of something else to complain about the trees. And I'd like to have a comeback to say, well, you know, the ones that they cut down are mostly saplings, aren't they? Or are they all big trees? Big trees.
Well, they haven't cut any yet.
No, I mean, but the ones that they're
proposed, yeah, there's pretty large trees in that area. Now, it's not by the river, in that the highway's there.
Yeah.
And that parcel, you know, the river goes underneath US 50 prior to reaching that parcel, but it's on the back side, on the south side, southeast side of the parcel.
But north of the highway.
But they're not developing it, are they?
No, they're creating compensatory storage in that area.
Well, then why?
It's defined as development. It won't have any buildings on it, but they'll be clearing that real estate.
And I couldn't figure out why it was such a.
They'll be clearing real estate to essentially create dry ponds for flooding events.
Right.
Couldn't they have given them a variance?
They could have asked for one. They chose not to. I believe they asked for a variance for parking and something else.
Things are more important to them, right? I mean, that's my judgment.
And they did tree bank a significant number of trees on that site as well. Because there's very few trees on the former Columbia Gas site. But the property adjoining that to the east is the one that I think the Service Safety Director was talking about. There's significant trees there.
I'll have to go back and look. I saw them sort of walking around in there. That's when I knew it might be changing. Maybe you were even with them. Anyway, who knows? Okay, so what, Mr. Stone, when all is said and done, if they bail in 2 years, will you still, that piece of pipe that you're adding needs to be done anyway, right? It's not a bad investment? I mean, you were holding them to the, maybe I shouldn't ask this in public.
Yeah, I don't think it matters whether it's public or not. It's a relatively complicated situation out there with sanitary sewer, and it'd probably be difficult for me to explain without a series of drawings.
I have it on my other one.
To show you, but
a yes or no. Do we need it anyway, right?
We need a portion of it. Yes.
Okay, so it's.
Yes, I can still, even if they bail, I can still
That's what I
make
wanted to hear.
some improvements.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
There are no indicators at this point in time that they're bailing, so let's.
Right. In fact, we
I would
have
be the only one. I've
documentation that
also
they are
said
moving forward.
compensatory and couldn't even figure it
Well,
out.
and
Okay.
I think that, given our discussion here today, I might go back and look at their plans, and if there's a suggestion for a variance that we can make in order to save some trees, I think we should. And that's something I think we can do, especially given the delay of this additional year, and they may be willing to do that. I'm sure if it saves them money, they'd be willing to do that, and it saves some trees. That'd be good as well.
Yeah.
And instead of planting new ones that might
Right.
die in the heat.
Right, absolutely.
Because, something reasonable. So compensatory?
I don't find it to be very effective, to be perfectly
You never
clear.
know how it's going to work.
That's correct. And there's very little real estate. A lot of the real estate that falls within that 20 and the 50 is more or less off limits anyway because it's in the floodway. But as you move out, you start to require these borrow pits and things on what is otherwise could be developable land or commercial land, and we're already pressed in and pretty mature city, and so that puts more pressure on extending sewer systems outside of the city and development going on in nearby communities and areas. So I think it does create additional developable sites on logical developable areas where we already have infrastructure and roads and police and fire support. And it's not a lot, in my opinion. But
A good example
Yeah.
would be Columbus Road. A lot of area for development out there, but I think that
Definitely,
a lot
yeah.
of potential developers look at it and see more challenge than worth that, given the current.
right.
I think also the Near East side, in the Stimson Mill, where we could do some urban infill. And the comprehensive plan, I'm sure as we re-looked at, but where there's some urban infill opportunities, that section of code may now have caused some barriers.
I'd agree. Yeah.
I had another comment in response to the planner's report. Can you talk briefly about how your comprehensive plan corridor efforts are nested with the Engineering Public Works project for the Simpson Avenue improvements?
Yes, in fact, I was just thinking about that this morning. I was reviewing some of the information about, I forget the consultants, Parsons, Brinker?
It's WPA.
WSP.
Yeah.
I can't remember their current name now, but WSP, they're going to be doing some stakeholder engagement in September, and I kind of reviewed their plan for that, and what we plan to do for each of these corridors, just to kind of backtrack, or I think the direction we're going to go is we're going to do an analysis of the situation, basically the lay of the land as it is today, kind of looking at what the anchors, what we identified as being anchors, as possible issues, even making assessments. Do we see blight? Do we see just how do things work in each of these corridors right now? Also trying to understand what do we think is coming on the horizon. For example, portions of Union Street, we're anticipating that Ohio University is going to have a massive investment there with expansion of the medical school as well as expansion of their engineering. And so that's going to change that's going to change that corridor significantly. Other corridors, Richland Avenue is more or less mature, for example. So we might have discussions like, here's how Richland Avenue works today. Is it basically working the way it should, or do we need to be talking about changes to Richland Avenue? And if so, how should it look? Richland, same with Stimson Avenue. This is how it works today. This is what we expect to happen. This is what we're doing with for the road. And how should Stimson Avenue look with a new gateway coming in from Ohio University? Or do we need to be looking at redevelopment options? Do we need to be thinking about setback requirements and all of that? Or do we think it functions the way it's supposed to function and basically leave it as is?
And we've got an opportunity because of the fact that within a couple years we're going to be doing a major infrastructure project on Stimson that members of the public who participate in this comprehensive plan effort on looking at the corridors will see some impact and some changes within a couple years. So I think it's a great chance for us to go and deliver on some of the public involvement where people say, "Hey, I'd like to see this," and then sure enough, 2 years later they see it. So it's a great opportunity to actually put a plan in place pretty quick after the endeavor goes forward.
And if we want change to happen, then it's discussions about how do we make that happen, or what tools do we have? Are there state development tools, downtown redevelopment districts, TIFs? Are there things like that we want to be looking at? Are there zoning changes we should be making? Do we want to look into setbacks and parking and heights and uses? Stimson's a really interesting one, I think, because it is zoned B3, which is the zoning for the north half of East State Street as well, and those are demonstrably different corridors. But the expectation is that they have the same use types based on our zoning descriptions. So they don't seem to be the right fit, I guess.
Much like the zoning of North Court Street and Carpenter as well, as being a B3, where the southern portion of Court Street is B2D. You mentioned, and I agree, the Richland Avenue corridor, is pretty much, fill. But, is further out, in other words, the 50 corridor that is within the city, is that part of that plan too, or am I thinking about this wrong in terms of
we'll include that in. Definitely, yeah. Most people who think of Richland, they think maybe all the way to Pomeroy Road. But a lot of people, unless they live on the south side, may not even realize that there's anything past the City of Athens sign on the bridge, on the overpass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, going on to see Mr. Siroy is not available. He's on vacation. There is no one in our live audience for citizens to speak. Announcements and other business. Our next meeting will be September 6, 2018, with the business of the Athens City Planning Commission completed. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.